So, I feel like that was the one layer of barrier I was able to like get past because of education.
Right.
But I mean, I feel like in general, like in any industry, you hear about gatekeepers. You might hear through the channel, oh, this person don't want you there and that. But it's like, okay, I'm so important to you that I'm somebody that you want to keep back. Thanks. That's flattering. Now, even more
it's also a clue that you're important enough to keep away.
Do you ever waste your time with somebody who you think has no potential? That like if you feel like somebody is not that good, you're not going to be threatened by them, so you just leave them there. But
right.
If you feel like somebody's going to be threatened.
Yes, man. Welcome everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday, which is not really a Wednesday. We just do it sometimes. It's actually Tuesday. And the time, I forget I should be doing this too, yes? Is our show showing all over the place. Accra, Ghana, 5:53. That is what, PM. Kiev, 20:53. That is 8:53. Santiago, Chile, 1:53 p.m. Right, so you have a little time check there, and where we going today, boy? We going Italy, I think. Well, we'll see. It may be a surprise. We have a guest with us, waiting in the wings. She is a dynamic mind to me. She's a director, writer, videographer. She does documentaries. She's a dynamo in the film world. I'm sure you will recognize the name once I let it go. She's somebody that has been working very hard. She's also a CEO of her own production company, Papon. Lecturer as well. So, and we'll get into all of that with her. But it's somebody I real happy to get onto the show. That is, she is currently, as she said, off screen, kind of sleepy. So we'll try and wake up with the conversation. Yes, people all over the places. All kind of different time zones we're trying to deal with, right? So we'll try and get as much information out of her in the time that we are allowed. And without further ado, it's me flying alone today again. So all you take it easy. There may be some turbulence. There may be some chop. But without further ado, bringing on our guest this week on International, SHARI Pettì. Oh, McGill. How you going?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah,
no major complaints.
When doing the show, sometimes I feel like every so often I get a new metaphor for it, right? So most of the times it's like fishing. So I just be, come out with my things, with my little net, my line and whatever, and I just cast out. And send out my emails and my messages and my DMs and all kind of thing and see what I catch, right? But, oh gosh, girl, with you, I just say this one feeling like, and it's a good thing we talking about film and thing, right? Because this one feeling like them international spy films, girl. where I am the inspector in Interpol, right? And you are the international cat burglar running around the place, getting me the slip here and there. I'll turn up in a restaurant where somebody say they see you, and poof, you're gone. Turn up in a train station and see you on the train going. So it's good fun.
I like that. I don't
And
know if that's great for me or bad for me, but I like it still.
no, but it actually the last time was what you were on a train and we couldn't get the interview. But that's how the thing does go. But yeah, so that is our metaphor, right? So I forget one of those. I think is who's the inspector from Pink Panther. Yeah, but that guy with the big nose. Yeah, so I feel like that in this case. But I'm glad we have you on.
Yes.
I,
Thank you for having me.
yeah. I expected a nice discussion, and I have a burning question that I will ask you now, but just stick a pin that I have. The burning question is going to come up, right?
Okay.
But as guests on this show experience regularly, we start with your beginnings, right? The origin, formative years, place you're from, because some people, have to establish their connection to Trinidad as they're outside so long. But we know your household name, but for the people that may not be as familiar, give us a little run through of your background, where you're from, because it's important. And like school into your beginnings in film.
Okay. So I am originally from Mova, Port of Spain, East Port of Spain.
Whoop.
And big up Mova.
Straight out.
And I would say in terms of my schooling, well, I went to Lower Mova Government. Well, my preschool was also in Mova too. I went to Happy Faces Kindergarten, and then I went to Lower Mova Government. Then I went to Bishop Anstey High School. Then I went to the University of the West Indies, and I did a double major in film production and studies. And then I did a Fulbright, and I went to Florida State University, where I did my master's in cinematography. So I don't necessarily call myself a videographer per se. Not that anything is wrong with that, but I don't think I do a lot of work in the videography space. At least not in probably for the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I would say I do more cinematography, directing, producing. And I edit a lot of my own work, not because I want to, but because I often have to. Because
trust me, I know what you mean.
I'm very particular, and it's always very hard to fully get what I want from an edit. So I have a few editors who I could go to for certain things, but a lot of the work I do, I also just edit myself.
Right.
And I would say my love for creativity started at Lower Mova Government by being in choral speaking, in the choir, music festivals, acting on stage from primary school. And then, I would spend a lot of time watching movies. Like my mom would leave me home and just have stacks of DVDs, new DVDs almost every week, sometimes every day if it's the vacation. And I would just spend a lot of time watching movies and watching local TV because I didn't have cable.
Right.
So I feel like a foundation in our local theater and film industry because I had no choice but to watch that. I couldn't watch cable. And then, also
Which
just listening to my parents' records. Yeah, I love that. I feel like there are a lot of films and TV shows that I watched growing up that even people my age and a little older than me have never seen because they grew up watching Disney Channel or whatever. So I'm grateful for that because it helps me as a filmmaker and a educator even further because I feel like I got it from the source.
Yeah.
And I would say even in high school, I would still act on stage, and I started acting more professionally then too through the Mad Company. And from there I would act in commercials and different PSAs even while I was still in high school, and got a way to earn some money while still in school.
Yeah.
So I would say, and well, even throughout primary and high school, I would always throw concerts, so have my own shows for people. I'm always instigating and bringing people together to hey, this teacher is pregnant and she's going on maternity leave, or this person is retiring, let's have a show about this. So let's I'll be the one collecting everybody money to go to the grocery so we could buy streamers and little snacks and stuff so that we could throw a show for people even as a 10-year-old and 9-year-old. And I feel like I see that kind of manifest throughout my life now, where I literally do the same thing, but
on a much larger scale.
Like,
Yeah.
like I have films. Come watch these films at Movie Town right now, and it's gonna cost this amount of money, and you all don't have to pitch up, but you're gonna have to pay me to come watch. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was always involved in creativity throughout my life in different ways, even if I didn't initially see it as that. Maybe initially I just saw it as me having fun, and I would say is when, like, honestly, the longest job I ever had that was not film, it was like the first 2 months that I left high school, and I worked at a credit union for 2 months, and I hated that experience so much because, I'm the kind of person, I hate monotony. I hate super routine things. Like, I like film because it allows me to have a different job every month.
Right.
Because months I'm editing, some months I'm shooting a documentary, some months I'm shooting a narrative film, some months I'm not teaching at all. I'm not shooting at all, but I'm writing, or I'm teaching, or I'm visiting another country and just exploring. For me, all of that is part of the creative process for me, and I literally need that. Like, anytime my life feels too rigid, I get, very antsy, and I need to change things up drastically, like super drastically. Yeah. I'm also very impulsive when it comes to how I approach my creative life in that kind of way, and would do things that my friends would be like, "Shari, why would you?" And then they realize that it worked out, and I might not know if it was going to work out, but I still do it regardless, because as I said, I need to do certain things so that I'm not feeling too comfortable at any point in time. And when I say comfortable, I don't mean I mean like the negative kind of comfortable. Like, I don't ever want to feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again, that I'm shooting the same things over and over again. Like, I always need something to refresh my mind, else I would be super bored.
Yeah, it had to be fresh.
Yes. So, I feel like throughout my life, I'm always like searching for new outlets. Like, for example, the impulsivity that I'm speaking about in 2020. Well, in 2020, I left the country during the pandemic to do my master's. So that's number one.
Right.
But, when I came back, I spent maybe a year and something, and I started feeling that restlessness again. So in 2024, I gave up my apartment, broke my lease. I've broken many leases in my life, unfortunately. That's just the nature of my life,
no,
I guess.
we ain't getting into those.
I broke my lease, and then I before that, I applied to so many things all over the world, and I spent 8 months going from country to country. And for the most of that time, besides one plane ticket, I was flying to 15 different cities, all paid for by some organization or a job or something. I spent 3 weeks in Cuba studying sound design. I spent a month in Guyana shooting a documentary. I spent a month in Oxford doing a residency, and another month in London editing a lot of the work that I was shooting all over the world. I spent some time in Grenada as well, Amsterdam. I was just moving from place to place to place. And, thankfully I was able to use my mind to find these opportunities to be able to allow me to be in these spaces doing what I want to do and enjoy doing best. And then eventually I was like, okay, time to go back home.
We have a progression of you from primary school into secondary school, right? At what juncture did it occur to you, or at what point was there a specific thing that you remember being the catalyst for you getting into film, or we said you were acting, so during high school. So was there an urge or an event that made you more interested in being behind the camera as opposed to being an actress?
Yeah, I think it'll be two things. After leaving school, I was still acting for about 2 or 3 years after leaving school. In commercials, on stage as well, and on film, but not as a lead, more like an extra in films. I found it was difficult for me to get leading roles or supporting roles in film, and that was frustrating me. So I was like, you know what? I ended up being an extra on a film and an extra yeah, and I ended up being an extra on a film set, and I asked one of the people who were working there, who's now one of my mentors, if I could, come and volunteer on set, because I just wanted to meet more people so I could be in more films.
Right.
Because I would assume a film set is where you would meet those kind of people. But like on my second day there, I realized, oh, I actually love doing this a bit more than being on camera. And I wasn't even doing anything glamorous. I was like picking up trash. I was in the locations department. I was picking up trash, giving people water, canning cigarettes because people smoke a lot of cigarettes on set, like, at 19. And, the person who I was working under, she was like, why don't you apply for film? And before that, I was actually doing geography. I was going to do geography at UE, and
Okay.
I took a year off so that I could decide what I wanted to do a bit more clearly. Because even though like I was the top of my class in geography, I got all ones with all A profiles in Cape, and I was pretty sure that's what I wanted to do academically, at least. I realized, wait, I need to like take my time and like really see if I could take a chance on this other thing. And from that second day, I was like, you know what, sure. Even though I never really touched much of a camera besides being in front of the camera, so I decided to, change my major, and I wrote to UE and asked if I could join their film program. And then that year, I just continued working on different film sets, and that's how I got into film more seriously, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also I realized the earning potential of the actor was less than, the earning potential as somebody who's working behind the camera. You work more often. People get fed up of seeing these faces over and over sometimes.
There's that, but there's also something that that I was thinking about while preparing for this discussion, right? There are a few, because we have spoken thus far to a lot of different people in different fields and things. Entertainment, environmentalists, activists, chefs, sports people, athletes, and admin staff of the TTOC. So again, an idea of developing a question of how people get into things, right? And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's based on, natural talent, the acumen and the gifts that you're born with. And then there are some things that that you really have to study. And in terms of sports, I mean, anybody could, go on the field or go in the park and kick a ball or bounce a ball or run or, ride a bike or whatever. But something like golf, you can't just, you're not just born with the talent to play golf or the opportunity to just go on and learn to do golf. And it's the same thing like film. As much as you may have an eye or a desire to tell stories, or a love for watching film, you have to study it. You have to train. You have to be exposed. Haha, a little, no pun intended. Yeah, you have to be exposed to the rudiments and the science of film and photography. So at what point in the journey? I know you said you were interested. You found it more interesting being behind the scenes and so on. But at what point during the process, like when you actually got into the film department in UE, did you realize that it was a lot more than you expected? Or did you realize it was a lot more than you expected? Sorry for assuming.
I haven't thought about it like that, if I'm being honest, because for me, when I enjoy something, it doesn't feel as difficult. I mean, yes, It's always going to take a level of practice, but, because I enjoyed film so much, I would just spend hours on YouTube watching a lot of tutorials and practicing every day with my camera. Every day I walk around with my camera. There's never really a day where it feels like a task, unless I'm doing something that I don't care about. That's why I always try to choose projects that, are in line with what I care about. Because then it'll be difficult. Then it's going to be hard. Now it's going to be stressful, which is not a thing that I that I cared. Like for me, this is something that I love, so I always want to be engaged in some kind of activity that I love. So it didn't feel like that. I would say my master's probably felt a bit more like that, but not from the work perspective. Like, yes, it was probably the most difficult thing I've done, like literally in my academic career, in terms of like the exhaustion that I felt. It was a conservatory type of environment. So like, for example, the longest break we got was maybe like 10 days off for Christmas, 10 days off for summer. Other than that, you were in school 6 days a week sometimes, and on the weekends you had to be like shooting a project that you could eventually present the next Monday type of thing. So like we were always working, and I was always tired and always exhausted, and the labor was just really, we spent like 12 to 14 hours on set as well. So we're always like, heavily, like we're always moving, we're always working.
It's like a boot camp, right? So
boot camp.
Yeah.
So for me,
you had the
like
total equipment, you had to be up before everybody else, you had to prepare things. Yeah.
Like, also like not just holding heavy cameras, like during my master's we did everything. So I had to learn how to, use a big generator on a truck, like a whole generator truck, and run power throughout entire houses so that we could have power. We because of the gear we were using, we didn't rely on house power. We couldn't, because it would trip the breakers. So we had to, do that role. I had to be a grip and like, take a bunch of heavy equipment on and off a big truck every single day. We also had to drive those trucks across, cities every single time we had to be on set. So I feel like it was definitely the most physically and tough thing I've ever done. Even outside of school, I haven't experienced that type of rigidity and exhaustion that I felt in school. But I was grateful for it, because it really sharpened my mind and made anything that I did after that much simpler. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. I would say, if somebody were to ask me about masters and going back to school, I would suggest that school, because it's very heavily practical, and you really have to earn your spot type of way. They only like taking like about 30 students per year, and you really have to like push really hard. You're not allowed to work while you're in school as well, because you literally don't have the time to work.
Yeah, try it if you're there, right? So you're going through these rigors, and you're being trained literally. What I appreciate about film school, and because I did some photography courses myself in the US, they really make sure that everybody on the team appreciates the input and the role of everybody else on the team by making you do those roles, by making you do those jobs. So a director at some point would have to be a grip, would have to be doing sound, would have to be, like you said, running lights, driving the trucks and all of that. So that is excellent preparation for the field that you're in. I want to talk about light and the study of light, as far as you were exposed to it. Light and photography, right? And the role it plays in you developing, even before you start shooting, before you start developing the story, developing the story in your mind, and at how soon, how early into the process do you consider that, or do you have the story and then you go into looking for locations or changing the light in locations that you choose?
I would say it depends. Sometimes it starts early, sometimes it's later down. Like sometimes, if I see something in the real world, I'm inspired by it, and I'm like, okay, I want to shoot here, and I want to shoot at this time because I saw it at this time and I know it's going to look beautiful,
right?
Type of way. Other times you develop a story and I know eventually I figure out, what might be the best way to approach this aesthetically. Like, how do I see these people, existing in the light, because I don't just think about framing. I think about, a frame it out, a light is a black box essentially. So
Right.
I have to think about that almost automatically in my approach. So I feel like they kind of work together in that kind of way. So I would say light is always at the forefront, and I take a lot of photos of like the perfect lighting scenarios so that I can return to them and approach them, in the future type way. Yeah, so I would say that it's always something that's in tandem with whatever I'm thinking about.
So you have like a notebook, or you have you jot down ideas with respect to light?
I'd say I would take a lot of photos. I have a Pinterest board that I'm always adding to. So I spend a lot of time on Pinterest. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. Whenever I see a new lighting setup or something that I feel like is literally beautifully, I have a folder called Cool Cine, and I just add the images to that, I would say. So yeah, that's how I go about it. And then when it's time to actually do the production, I would sometimes use Shot Designer or different there's another app that I'm forgetting that I'm able to pre-visualize different lighting, so that when I get on set, I don't have to think about what I need to do to make it happen. I already know where the lights need to be and what intensity they need to be and what angle they need to be at. So I would say there's that. Other than that, my other relationship to light is that I'm actually very sensitive to light. Like right now, this is too much light on. I spend a lot of time in very dim settings. This is mainly the only thing that I have on. I usually take off the overhead lights, and that's for me because it's just too much exposure, as you see.
Yeah, I feel there'll be a lot of film terms and photography puns during the course of this thing. What I was going to ask you, right? So do you, as you said, which is sensitivity to light, do you recognize the difference in light in different places in the world?
Yeah, I would say for sure, especially when it comes to sunlight, different parts of the world, because of how far or close they are to the equator, and how much more access to sunlight they have in a day, the quality of light definitely changes. I would say, definitely Caribbean, and I've never been to Africa, but I would assume they have the same setting when it comes to being so close to the equator,
right,
or overhead being super harsh and casting really dark shadows. But if you're in somewhere like Europe at 12 midday, you might not experience the same thing. It's more like a diffuse light, and also because they might have cloudier conditions, even though the light might still be there. So it's more of a diffuse, more flattering light because it's filtered through. And not to say that harsh light is unflattering. It depends on how you use it, how you shape it.
Right, yeah.
So, on camera. So like for me, I know my access to light in Trinidad is much more limited, because by the time it's 5:30, even 5, light kind of starting to go. Or I would try to shoot, if I'm shooting outdoors, I would try to use that window where it's like maybe 3. So by 4:30 we're set up, and we could just grab the shot between 4:30 and 5:30, 6 latest. But when I'm here, even here in Italy, I know I have at least until 9 or 8:30 to be able to utilize the light that's there, and it's still going to be looking like sunset from 3 or 4 straight up until 9, and I could access that light for a much longer time.
Right, that's definitely an advantage. I didn't think about that, about the time that the light is available. We'll take a little break here. But when we come back, I wanna talk to you because you mentioned something. It's not the burning question yet. You mentioned something about doing things that you enjoy while you're doing it, and doing things that make it feel like work, right? So I want to talk about work when we come back. So taking a little break, and we're coming back now.
Need to raise funds for your next creative project, event, or invention? Or maybe you or a family member are raising funds for much-needed medical treatment. Now, you can get started raising that much-needed cash via Donate68.com, the newest 100% homegrown crowdfunding platform in Trinidad and Tobago. Donate68.com accepts donations from all major credit cards, but not only that, for those without a credit card, you can use your everyday Visa debit card to make donations. So log on today and create a campaign for your next passion project, startup, or cause. Share your campaign with your community of family, friends, and supporters to get the financial backing you need. Donate68.com. Funding your culture.
Nice, and we're back. Yes, we're back. We're back with Shari. Hold on. Yes, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for staying with us. Right. So before we went to the break, I mentioned we're coming back to talk about work, but more so the differentiating circumstances. Right. So you said, and naturally we would expect that you want to work on things or want to present things that you feel closely or strongly about, that you like to experience, or that you would want people to experience. But that doesn't always pay the bills. Like, we face facts, right? So some things you would do just from a commercial aspect. You're a professional in the industry. How do you then approach jobs? Do you actively seek them? Do they come to you? And when you negotiating the jobs, how much creative input do you expect to have?
I mean, sometimes things come to me. Sometimes for me, the ones that I go towards would be only the thing that I care deeply about. So if there's a musician or artist in general, not just a musician, that I feel like I want to be a part of their archives. I want to contribute to what they have going on. I would, speak with them and negotiate with them in that type of way. Other than that, people come to me a lot of times for more commercial ventures, whether it's ad agency or, somebody with a business as well. And for me, I honestly only take it if it's in line with what I, care about. But thankfully, there are, a lot more things that come to me that I would care about, because people see the work. And if it's I would assume somebody wouldn't just randomly come to me to do something that they haven't seen much of from me, I would say. So, if it's something that they feel that if usually they would come to me because they saw this thing and this thing is in line with their business, then they would reach out in that kind of way. Same thing with agencies, like, hey, we have a ad here and it has to do with so and so and so. I feel like you'll be the best fit for something like this. Sometimes I seek things out, like I would see calls on the internet for example, I last year I did some work with BBC Storyworks in St. Lucia because I was looking for let me see what remote opportunities they have out there, and I saw this brief and I applied and I got to shoot for them in St. Lucia. Sometimes they come to me, like we said, last week actually, there's a documentary I filmed for Arte, which is based in Germany, and they had a documentary that they wanted to shoot on sugar, but they reached out to me because they saw my website and they were looking for a cinematographer in Trinidad. So, that was in line with what I would want to do, because, I'm from this place where a lot of our capital at a certain point in time came from the exploitation of sugar. So why wouldn't I want to learn more about that? So I feel like it goes that way. I mean, other than that, honestly, I also do a lot of my own work through applying for grants and applying for residencies, where I have time to spend a couple months or a couple weeks in another country and just focusing on finishing the work, and I would get money from for a stipend to focus mainly on that. So it varies depending on the time of year and what I have going on, etc., etc. Right now I'm in Italy because of Erasmus Plus. There's someone who I met a literal decade ago in Trinidad, and he's Italian, and he works at this university university that I did a guest lecture at here. And when Erasmus Plus came up, he was like, you'd be the perfect person to come and, bring your knowledge of Caribbean film history and bring your film so that people could see what film in the Caribbean is. And even the first question I asked the room when I started my lecture was, hey, have you ever seen a Caribbean film? And nobody was able to say yes.
Right.
So, things come up based on many different circumstances.
Well, yeah, that kind of leads into the next question, which is why telling Caribbean stories is important. Why does it matter? And you just said you went to this foreign country, and nobody nobody in the room has seen a Caribbean film. How important is that to you to make sure that that this doesn't happen? Or I shouldn't say it, that's kind of drastic. Not that this doesn't happen. That is life. People don't see everything all the time. But how important is it to you that people do see and people do hear our stories?
For me, I think it's important that anybody on this earth from any country should be able to see themselves represented and accurately represented. Because, I feel like film has been used. Film is it's still a young art form, but even in the early days until now, you see how it can be used for propaganda. There are early films in the world that literally are banned because they were used for, to literally hypnotize people and tap into mental health issues and those kind of stuff. So there's so many different ways you could use film, but you could also use it to positively impact a population. With Cuba, for a long period of time, they only showed films from Cuba, nothing else, because they wanted to instill a sense of national pride and identity in their people. And I feel like, they achieved that, even though, there's a lot more going on in Cuba that, even out of their control. Yeah. But from a film perspective, I appreciate learning that. And I know, in a space like Trinidad, if more of us are able to see not just films about crime, not just skits, but films that really reflect our everyday lives, and where you could plant your messages in there in a non-cheesy, non-corny way, and let people know, hey, this is what it means to be from this space, and these are the issues we're dealing with, and this is how you could treat with these issues, or this is how this character is choosing to deal with this issue. Or if there's something that you need to bring light to, like, for example, I was looking for documentaries on traditional mass, and the only thing I could find was newscasts or one maybe like a 3-minute video on YouTube that's not the most aesthetically pleasing, so a lot of younger people might not be interested in seeing that. So I decided, let me make a series about all of them.
Mass, yeah.
So this is how I approach my filmmaking. Like whatever I want to learn, I would assume other people also need to learn, because if I wanted to learn it, there are plenty of people out there who don't know the information too. So that's how I approach my filmmaking. And in general, I feel like by default the importance of it flows out, because now you have many archival documents that could surpass my lifespan, and people could go back and watch a documentary from 2020 or 2025 and see, oh shuck, this is how people were doing Mokojambi in 2020 in Trinidad. And I'm not on the earth anymore, but they now have this archival document that they could use to replicate, making it in 2100 when we might no longer, have some of these characters anymore.
Yeah, it's true. So in that light, do you do you see yourself as a pioneer, or do you see yourself in a line of people who have contributed to that archival process?
Honestly, I see myself as myself. I don't really see myself in that way. I feel like that's for other people to bestow on me. I'm not thinking about my activities in that kind of way. I'm thinking of my activities as an artist as I have these ideas I want to execute throughout my lifetime, and I know at least for the next 15 years the type of films I want to make. And when I first started making films, I knew the films that I wanted to make between then and now, and I've made most of them. And whatever I haven't made is because I didn't have the funding or the resources to make it happen. So, I'm thinking of my career and my life as a continuous journey of me fulfilling all my desires and me bringing into this earth the things that are in my mind that I want to see actualize. And if that eventually wins me a big top award, if that eventually lands me in an archive or in a museum, if that eventually puts me on a map as, the top 10 filmmakers from Trinidad and Tobago, that's a consequence of that dedication to what I want to do right now.
That's a real interesting way of looking at it. So would you say that that you would have had mentors or people that you looked up to in the field while you were getting into it in the early days, or you had that mindset of fulfilling your own visions from the beginning?
I would say a little bit of both. I've always had my mindset, even from the age of 4, I wanted to be an actress because I watched Crooklyn by Spike Lee and I saw that the lead was a young black girl. And I'm like, oh shucks, I feel like I could do this. I want to do this, right? So and it never left my mind as a thing that I wanted to do, even though it changed to filmmaking, because acting eventually I was a bit too anxious in the acting world, and it wasn't dependent on how talented you were. It was dependent on what somebody wanted to see for their film, and it might not always be me. So that's another thing that I have no control over. But what I have control over is what I can make from as a filmmaker and who I could put in the work. And if I want to put myself in the work, then by all means. I haven't done it yet, but I would say people who have inspired me would be like people like Damien Macano, because he's also from Mova, and the first feature film I saw that was completely shot in Trinidad was his film, and I was 16.
That was
and I saw it
Fighter.
Yeah, and I was like, oh shucks, like people could actually do this thing really well. Like people could actually, bring a film and have it be, shot really well. The acting is really well done and all this kind of stuff too. And not just filmmakers inspire me, but, in terms of artists in general, like Christopher Cozier is a mentor of mine or a friend. Like, I feel like we have a lot of definitions, because I'm close friends with his daughter and I spend most of my Christmases with them. But we also collaborate together on a lot of work, but he also gives me a lot of advice, but he also, his work is also very inspiring. His work is actually
absolutely.
right here in Italy.
Yeah.
I interacted with his work just last week here in Italy. So, I feel like he's somebody who has a lot of deep knowledge about our artists in general, across the board.
Definitely. Chris Cozier, for sure.
So, that's somebody who I would say I get a lot of inspiration from. Not necessarily I don't make work to look like his work or in that kind of way, but I'm inspired by his dedication to doing what he wants.
Yeah,
and,
very much so. Yeah.
His way of making, I would say. Other than that, I have a lot more. I have some other foreign influences, I would say. There are some musicians who I've always loved. I obviously love Beyonce. Esperanza Spalding is my favorite musician because I really love, similar to Chris, similar to Damien. I love musicians or artists who their expression is 100% what they care about and what they want to do. They aren't doing anything to fit a mold or to fit into a box. They completely, they draw outside of the lines and expansively create, generate things that you probably haven't heard on this earth or seen on this earth. So, those are the people who I would say most make impacts on me, I would say. Yeah.
Right, nice. And you hit the nail on the head with the burning question. So the burning question is, what going on in Mova that it could produce you and Damien, two young directors, filmmakers that have this it is going to be another pun, right? That have this vision that is so unique, and you all are not saying that you all are the same, but you all are completely different to each other, but in a way that is the same, in a way that is so individual and separate from everything else that is going on. You know him. You're right. So all right. So I was just thinking about the age gap now. If you all would have interacted locally, I'm sure you would have probably interacted with him
3 or 4
professionally.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've interacted with him whenever he's in Trinidad, and like his wife, we keep in touch on WhatsApp as well too.
Nice. He's a cool soldier. That I've interacted with him the couple of times that we bounce up or whatever. So any plans of collaboration? You all talk about work at all, or you just I don't know. Where's the relationship?
We've talked about work in the past, but they are also very private about, when and how they roll out whatever they have rolling out. So it's not stuff that I could talk about per se.
No, I wasn't asking you my business.
Yeah, but we definitely talk about collaborating in the future, like me shooting something for him, like one of his stories, or they support. They also mention if I have anything coming up that I would like support with to let them know. So, that's why we keep in touch, and I let them know what I have going on, and I send the films that I have going on, and feedback and scripts and those kind of stuff for sure.
Yeah, that's nice to know. That you have a support group, a community. That's another thing that we try to investigate on the show is the communities that exist in different fields with Trinis and by extension Caribbean people. Because once you leave home, once you leave the places that you grew up, and a lot of people go out there alone. They don't go with families and that kind of thing. And you kind of gather up, and create your own family and your own community. So having that support system is very important. What was the next thing I was going to ask you? Right. Serious questions now. Nah, just play. But it is a serious question. Did you experience any barriers to enter in the film industry? I mean, school is one thing, and you're helped along the way, and you're given the training, and you're given the tutelage, and you're given the knowledge and the exposure to information. But when it comes time to leave that safety net, as it were, and go out into the world as a professional, as, let's not beat around the bush, as a black woman, a young black woman, in a field that a lot of people say is male-dominated, but I don't think so. From what I've seen locally, in terms of directors, we have a lot of very good, excellent, matter of fact, female directors. I don't consider that part of the film industry male-dominated. Maybe it's just the people I know. You could say different. But were there any barriers or any pushback to you entering the field as a professional?
So when it comes to pushback or barriers, I would say like the reason why I did my master's, besides wanting to have more information, is that I wasn't really getting the opportunities to like handle cameras and light in the way that I wanted to, because I wasn't really like getting those kind of job opportunities that I could even practice, or wasn't, being invited to those sets, I would say. So, being able to go somewhere and have unlimited access to all this high-tech gear and learn from like my professor who taught me cinematography. He has like an Oscar nomination and like worked on some of the best films that I watched growing up. Like when I was growing up, I loved watching Stuart Little and Planet of the Apes, and he worked on Transformers and all those stuff. So he was very instrumental in passing a lot of his knowledge down to me and not gatekeeping that knowledge, I would say. So, I feel like that was one layer of barrier I was able to like get past because of education.
Right.
But I mean, I feel like in general, like in any industry, you hear about gatekeepers. You might hear through the channel, oh, this person don't want you there and that. But it's like, okay, I'm so important to you that I'm somebody that you want to keep back. Thanks. That's flattering. Now, even more
it's also a clue that you're important enough to keep away.
Do you ever waste your time somebody who you think has no potential, like, like if you feel like somebody is not that good, you're not going to be threatened by them, so you just leave them there. But
Right.
if you feel like somebody's going to be threatening you, some people, if they're insecure, they would try ways to not make them get to that point. But for me, that's an indicator that I should continue moving forward, and I don't need to get the opportunity through those people per se. I could always find there are people who support me in other ways in other parts of the world, or in people who might not necessarily be filmmakers, but they are academics, or that they are exhibitors where they own a movie theater, and they would reach out to me directly, or we would collaborate directly, and that's how I would get those opportunities, and get past those barriers where if it might be through other means, there might be blockages, I would say. So I feel like in any industry you would face those things, and especially even more as as you said, as a Black woman, that is something that I do think about. But I know if I think about it too hard, it will make me very depressed, and I would move at a much slower pace if I keep thinking, oh, I'm a Black woman, so you should feel sorry for me. It's like, no, I'm good at what I do, so there should be general respect for what I have going on regardless. And I try in my own way with younger people, whether they're male or female, to not be that person who makes them want to quit, not be that person who keeps them back from moving forward, because what do I gain from being like that? I don't gain anything from being like that, I would say. So that's how I approach these things. You really have to have your blinders on and just think about why you're doing what you're doing. For me, I know I'm not doing it because I want clout. I'm not doing this because, I want to be the coolest person on earth. I'm doing this because I have stories in my mind and images in my brain that I need to see right now. And I keep doing that until I see it.
Right.
Regardless of what anybody else feels about that.
And what about expectations? Because we could still talk about that racial dynamic. Because in the mainstream we have a lot of a significant amount of Black filmmakers. It's not one or two anymore. You have the Ryan Cooglers, the Peels, you have the Tyler Perrys, you have the same Damian McCannos, you have who else I was thinking about? Yeah, Shonda Rhimes. So you have all these creative powerhouses that establish themselves within the past 10, 20 years. It's not just Spike Lee and John Singleton anymore. It's not a minority thing anymore. So is there an expectation of the stories or an expectation of the point of view that you might have, especially coming from the Caribbean?
Expectations and stories. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, even like some of those names you called, because there is a barrier, even just being from the Caribbean, like, what Ryan Coogler and even Spike Lee and Shonda, what they're able to access is very different from what I'm able to access. They have access to film funds, they have access to, direct access to being in America and being in those spaces. You have way more access to grants and funds. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, most of the stuff that we're doing is self-funded, or if you happen to have a link with the best brand managers on the island, you could get anything funded. I don't have a link with the best brand managers on the island, so a lot of the things I have to do end up being either self-funded or external grants that are, very few and far apart, but available to people all over the world. Yeah. But most of the time, like, those grants are, US based only, UK based only. So they have that kind of advantage, I would say. When it comes to expectations on stories, my only expectation is to tell the story that I care about or that I want to see. And, in the past, I've never made any work that I would say I'm doing it tailored for a certain audience. And I feel the brunt of that in some ways where, certain film festivals, I find, when it comes to Caribbean films, they mainly focus on Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba, Dominican Republic. And is often trauma porn, is often, how sad it is to be queer, how hard it is to be black. How hard it is from these spaces. This is a real part of our world and life, but I don't want to lead into that all the time. Like, those aren't the stories that I care to tell the most. Like, I want to also show our everyday life. Like, people could be poor or queer and still have, that could be a backstory for what their main, like, driving force is, or the main thing that they are experiencing in their stories. But I realize that, the world is still catching up to those things. Like, they still think that we have to do these kind of, overly depressing, overly about race, overly about this thing type of stories. And I personally find those kind of drawn out and done before. Like I don't want to, like I barely go to cinema because I feel like I see the same stories over and over again. Whether it's blockbusters, how much time am I going to see something blow up, a car blow up and helicopters and chases? And then on the other side, while I do appreciate that a lot more African Americans have the opportunity to make work and films, I don't want to see another slave movie. I don't want to see another, how hard it is to be Black and this in this country. Like, that's great. It has a space, and there are people who make those films, and cheers, kudos to them. But I want to make films about people, people, not just Black people, even though I'm a Black woman, like those will obviously be my lead in stories, but about people in spaces who have interesting stories to tell, like, that could, develop over time, that don't have to just be that, everything is about this topical thing that we have right now. I feel like that's a cheap cop-out and an easy end. It's an easy end. Yeah. But it's a cheap cop-out for me. So even though it might mean that, the work that I make might either take a longer time to develop, or it might have very niche audiences, which at least I would say right now, at least I've been told that it does have niche audiences right now. I'd much rather do that because that's what I want to see. Because if I make anything else, it won't be me, and it wouldn't be what I care to see at the moment. Because I'm from I've literally run away from bullets many times in my life. I could easily tap into that. Yeah. I can easily tell those stories. I didn't grow up super rich. My mother is one of 14. My dad is one of 4. Like, I have a lot of family members, and there's a lot of poverty around me. But, if I'm so literal in telling those stories, that's kind of boring to me. Right. But I don't mind telling those stories in a more underlying way, but I'm leading with something else, I would say.
Yeah. So, all right. So without selling out any projects that you might have on the stove, what would, and I shouldn't ask about a specific project, but what would a Caribbean, a Trini/Caribbean film industry ideally look like to you? How would it work?
It would look just like the amount of different people we have on this island. It will be very vast and varied, and not one note at any point in time, and include many different cultures and many different topics, and it will be funny and sad and dramatic and absurd all at the same time, in my opinion. And experimental as well, because with AI taking over everything, there's more now, at least more than ever, you have to be more unique in the way that you tell stories, because then you're going to end up looking like every other story that exists. But if there are more ways for you to be more unique in the way that you either display a story from a format perspective or tell a story from a script writing perspective, I feel like you would have the upper hand in the end.
Yeah, it's interesting, the flexibility, or not even flexibility, the power that AI bring in, especially to visual production. You did anything with comedy, like pure comedy?
For me, I don't really write in a genre, but I would say I have 2 films that I would say might be. Like, I have a film called Fantastic Friday and a most recent proof of concept called Just Irie. Fantastic Friday, whenever it goes to festivals, I don't have a genre for it. For me, it's a slice of life. Right. But sometimes they put it in the comedy section, sometimes they put it in the thriller section, sometimes they put it in the drama section. I just accept whatever they put it in. Right. But the audience is always laughing at some point of the film, and the audience, at some point in the film are also shocked and want to know what's going to happen next in that kind of way. Yeah. So that's why I mean by, I'm not writing for any genre or one audience. I'm writing a story that's in my mind, and, I feel like I will allow the story to assign its own genre. And I would say I'm a more of a genre bender. I kind of don't put, I don't think about the genre in that kind of way. And then Just Irie is, the way that I describe it I showed at a movie town for 2 weeks earlier this year. And then I also showed it here in Italy, and I showed it in Oxford in April as well. And, once again, there are funny moments. People are laughing in the audience, and then there are moments where people are very quiet and tune in and want to know, what's going on here. This kind of shaky, and then there's drama in it too, because we're Trinidadians and we can't get away from being dramatic at any time.
Yeah.
So, that's another thing but also the version of Just Irie that I showed is not even the final form. I only made that way that it is because it was self-funded, but the way that I want to do it, it's way more magical. Like the elements of magical realism within the comedy, within the drama, within the serious moments that takes more of a budget to actualize and for people to see what the full potential is. So I would say, like, everything that I've done narratively, besides one film, have some kind of comedic edge by nature, and but there's a lot more than laughing going on when you actually watch the films. And right now I feel like I also have like a experimental film practice that's developing over time, which I feel started even when I was in UE. I feel like I was making work that was experimental, but I just didn't know that that's what it was. And while I was in grad school, I made a film that was almost very surreal in general, and that showed at the Pan-African Film Festival and at Screamfest LA, which is one of the largest horror film festivals in the US. And that was more pure experimentation in the film realm. So and right now I've been doing like even more pushing forward further in the experimental realm. Like what I did in Martinique and showed in Martinique recently was like a 2-channel video, with volcanology as a physical literal sense, but also volcanology in the Caribbean from a metaphorical standpoint of, we're always being created and destroyed in this region, both physically and, creating new societies from the, destruction that the Europeans created and the genocide, and we created new societies when the Africans came and they claimed the land and they did, they made it, assimilated and made it what they had to do. And, but we're fragmented physically because we're separated by water. And there's all these kind of like metaphorical layers of destruction and creation that facilitate that present us as archipelago. So yeah, I would say that's an example of how much I don't just do one of anything. I don't like being bored, so the work that I make shouldn't bore me either.
Yeah, I could see that, and we appreciate it. I want you can you touch on something there? I want you to expand, if you will, on the time it takes to develop the finished film product, right? If all goes well. Now you also mentioned funding and grants and things like that, but we're talking about things like draft, things like casting, things like because we had a costume designer on in the first few episodes of the show, Sarah Woodham, who spoke about having 3 months to sometimes a year to just develop the costuming. We're not talking about anything else. She's just dealing with what people are going on wear on a film or a TV show. So talk to us about scheduling a project, a realistic expectation of, from ideation, writing it out, to actually seeing it in a form that you are satisfied as a director, as a writer, a screenwriter, as you would be satisfied seeing it on the screen.
I would say, like, I'm trying to remember the name of this quote exactly, but I feel like, whatever time you allot to something, this is not the quote, but, is the time that you make to create it, if that makes sense. So if I tell myself, for example, with Just Irie, I told even though it was in development from before, because I had ideas from before about what this film might be and but, initially I thought maybe this might take several months to shoot. But then I met a friend who ended up being a co-producer and, a close collaborator of mine. And she was like, yo, I'm going to be in Trinidad for like 10 days in so and so and so. Let's shoot this thing in like 2 days. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Why not shoot this in 2 days? And that's how I shot it in 2 days. We got it edited in like a week. And then by the end of that month, it was done. But, that's like, because we told ourselves we have to make this happen in this month. Because then let it lag and lag and lag. We're gonna, that's gonna be the time that we now allot for this thing. If we say it's gonna be 3 months, then we're gonna find a way to make it happen.
3 months, yeah.
If I tell myself it's gonna take a year, then I'm gonna find out, So for me, that's how I kind of approach a lot of things. But other things, if it's more dependent on funding, like when I did mass prep, the first episode I did just by myself. I shot it in one day with 2 friends, and I edited it in like maybe another day as well. So I would say 2 days of labor to make that happen. But that was an idea I had from before that I developed in the form of a brief, and I sent it around for funding, and nobody accepted it. So I decided to just make something. And then for the second episode, I used that first episode, and I got funding from the UK via One World Media to make my second episode. And I had a whole year to make that episode. And I had, I had funding, I had like mentorship for the entire year. But I lagged on that edit because I was given a whole year to do it, but I could have done that edit in the same one day, which I ended up doing. I did the edit in like 2 days when I actually sit down and properly did it, but I just let it sit for months, and then it took months for me to complete that. But when I came back to Trinidad, I got I used those 2 episodes to shop around and get a lot more funding to make a full season with 6 episode, even though it wasn't enough funding to cover everything, at least the beginning of production, I was able to cover it with that. And for me, that took a lot longer time because I was also doing like commercial work so that I could support myself, along with, trying to finish this, along with, trying to understand like where am I going to get the time to edit it, because like certain things like that, I have to edit it, unfortunately, sometimes, because, the thing that I'm looking for, I haven't gotten it from another editor. I know I could give another editor to edit like a music video for me or a commercial for me, but when it comes to my documentaries, like I really go through it with a fine-tooth comb. So, it took a lot more time for me to finish that. I started shooting in 2023 and I finished my final episode editing in 2025. So 2 years. And, if I told myself, no, actually, I'm not going to take 2 years to do this. I have this funding now. We're going to use these next 2 months and shoot every single thing back to back to back. And then we're going to sit down in a lab for 2 months and edit everything back to back to back. But, not every time I have that time and privilege to be able to just 100% dedicate my energy and efforts to what I'm doing only. So, thankfully, just Irie, I would have, had some downtime. So I had my own gear, so I didn't have to pay for a lot of gear or anything like that. So I was able to like do that in a short space of time and know that, my friend is only here my co-producer is only here for these 10 days. So we have to get it done between these 10 days somehow. So that's why I was able to like activate and just like, not think about time and make it happen.
Yeah, but for sure. Sometimes you just gotta grab it.
I think it's what it should take or would take, or would hope, if you're dedicated to what you're doing, because some people might dedicate time to something and then not follow through with their own advice. But for me, if I'm spending my money, I need to actually see the happening.
Yeah. I feel that. So we'll take our next little break here. I want to come back, and because I know it's late for you, so we'll come back to wrap up on some things. But when we come back though, I want to talk about scene productions, right? So we'll do that. I will let you be the boss, boss lady, and we'll wrap it up when we come back. So see you all in a bit.
Need to raise funds for your next creative project, event, or invention? Or maybe you or a family member are raising funds for much-needed medical treatment. Now, you can get started raising that much-needed cash via Donate68.com, the newest 100% homegrown crowdfunding platform in Trinidad and Tobago. Donate68.com accepts donations from all major credit cards, but not only that, for those without a credit card, you can use your everyday Visa debit card to make donations. So log on today and create a campaign for your next passion project, startup, or cause. Share your campaign with your community of family, friends, and supporters to get the financial backing you need. Donate68.com, funding your culture.
Yes. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. We have Shari here. I'm gonna make sure we have Shari here and I in line. Hey, right. So, welcome back. So, before the break, we say we're coming back to talk about your company. There's something I had to ask four guests so far. Is time management your superpower?
I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. There's some things I'm better at managing than others, I would say.
Okay, because you do lecture still. Right.
Part-time, just during the first semester of the year.
Okay. I thought you had a regular schedule throughout. All right, so that works and gives you time to travel. So scene productions. What was the impetus to creating that? What brought it about? What are you most proud about the company so far?
I would say I started seeing soon after leaving UE, and before I was making a lot of work under my name and on my own YouTube page. And, I felt like I was doing work that wasn't always just me on my personal work. Like if I'm doing a client job, I felt like that needed its own separate thing. Or if I'm making like a series, I didn't want to just have somebody search my name to find a series. They could search a company and know that, under this company, they could see all these films type of way. So it started like that, and also me needing to register a business so I could do actual proper accounting and proper taxes and those kind of stuff too, and not just be using my personal account. Even though I was young, I was 23 when I started seeing.
But
I felt like
commingling is a serious thing.
Yeah, I feel like I needed to formalize a business so that I could have, stuff going into like a formal channels. And also you can't apply for certain grants if you don't have a registered business
there
too.
You go, yeah.
So all those benefits that came about with having like something more formalized, which I'm grateful for, because, even now I think that I'm proud of. I feel like I'm able to say, have my stamp, not just in Trinidad, but in different parts of the world by having my company represent a lot of my films. Yeah. People take you more seriously, I guess, when you have something that's, external or separate from you as well. So I would say those have, been some of the benefits of doing that. I feel like, recently I even though I have Addies from before, it was more Addies as an individual. But
this is Addy Awards, advertising awards, right? Just to be clear.
Recently, in total, I have 13 now, and recently I won Best of Online. Well, I won Best of Show in 2024, but this year I won Best of Online, not just in the Caribbean Addies, but also District 4, which is in Florida. So, I applied for it. I wasn't expecting to win Best of Online. I didn't even know that was a category, but I'm grateful that happened in that kind of way.
Yeah.
But, I feel like I'm especially proud that the ideas for the films that I had when I was developing the company are actually, the films actually exist now and people could watch them. And I look forward to, actualizing all the other, films that I decided, need to be under this brand moving forward.
Yeah, you have a is there a picture in your mind or an ultimate goal for the company, or maybe even the next 5-10 years? Where do you see it growing into?
I would definitely love to be able to create at a much faster rate and much more films. Right now it's a very small team. Like sometimes it's just me and an assistant, and then I would hire some other people maybe like for like 2 or 3 months terms if I have more things to accomplish during a certain time.
Yeah.
But it would be great to be able to every week or every day there's something for people to watch, whether it is on YouTube, whether it is streaming on some bigger platform, like external to mine, like a distributor external to mine. That'll be the the goal, because because I have a lot of ideas. I'm never short of ideas ever. It's just the capital and the time to execute those ideas.
Yeah, and there's only one you, right?
Yeah.
All right. So in your mind, right, when you're creating, do you create with the audience in mind, or is it purely an expression of your imagination or something that you want to see or say? And asking that to ask if there's any change in the vision, in the portrayal of what your idea is first.
I'm the audience. If I like it, then I assume other people who have my similar interests would like it too. So, for me, I'm the first audience member, and once I like it, then I will put it out. If I don't like it, then I won't put it out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Is there something that that you want to document locally, anything traditionally, culturally that you haven't yet, that you're really interested in doing?
It would be great to get like the behind the scenes rituals of the whip jabs. I haven't been able to like document them. I've tried many times, but they're very, secretive about that aspect of their practice.
Right.
But I always think, if when these people die or these families die, there's nothing that we can see that could show us, hey, this is how you could, manifest this character now in this day and age and accurately pay reverence to what was there in the past. For me, that's more important for me than just making a documentary for making a documentary's sake. Like, I think about the archival potential all the time.
Yeah, it's true. I haven't seen. I mean, people have interviewed them, and I've seen videos on them, but yeah, the preparation and things like that. Yeah, it's true. I wonder if there's a guile thing, boy. Maybe not. Maybe I imagining it. What was the next question, boy? I had a nice question for you, So, as someone who has been acting, directing, writing, does editing, all of that, you observe people in a very interesting way, in a rare way than most people generally do, right? With respect to identity, because that is something at the core of this show, and the Trinidadian identity, to you, what is it? Is it something that is real? Is it a performance? Is it just a habit that we are the way we are? Is it a face that we put on when we're doing different things? Or is there something at the heart of the Trinidadian psyche, of the persona that you see or that you capture?
I feel like, the identity, I don't think there's one Trinidadian identity to begin with. I feel like we are so varied because of how many different people from different, races and backgrounds were able to pass through this space. I think what I'm most amused by is, more so the classes that exist within Trinidad and how different classes express themselves, and how different classes are either advantaged or disadvantaged, and what they do with that advantage or disadvantage. For myself, I feel like my experience as a Trinidadian is through those classes. I feel like I grew up in a certain class, and I very much intimately know how that class operates and how to navigate that class. And I feel like I could return to those spaces very easily and blend in like nothing. And then, through education at Bishops and stuff, I feel like I got to understand a whole nother class. Actually, my first week in Bishops, I asked my mom to transfer to Southeast because I was a fish out of water. Right. I felt like I hated that people were telling me how to speak. I hated that, like, this was my first time seeing people with bigger, fancier cars picking up their children, and, friends who had pools and da 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 da. And I didn't have those things. And it wasn't from an envy perspective. It was from I don't feel comfortable here. I need to be somewhere real with friends who are like me. But then she told me, just tough it out, stay for the month and see if you still like it. I didn't like it after the month, but I decided to stay regardless. And I found my tribe and my people who were more in line with how I existed. And, people understanding of certain classes in Trinidad through that experience. And then, from UE, which I felt was it wasn't necessarily a middle class or working class or even an upper class. It felt like kind of classless in a not in a, they have no class, but, I couldn't place people because there are people coming from all different types of schools, studying all different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And, you can be very brilliant and study in film, but people think because they study in film, you're stupid. And it's like, no, I'm actually very smart, but I decided that I want to do this thing. Or, there are people who study in law and all these fancy things, but they're not that actually, smart at the same time. So, like, I feel like I like that. I couldn't do that judgment as easily being in a space like that. So, and then, when I went away and understanding how the diaspora exists and operates in Trinidad, like whenever I'm in London, it's so funny because there are people who I would hang out with there that I know if they knew where I was from and they were in Trinidad, they would never hang out with somebody like me. But over there, it's like, oh, you could be in London, so let's be friends, kind of thing. So that's another class that I've been understanding over these past 4 years, just being, visiting the diaspora more frequently. And, being in a space like when I went to school in Florida, where there wasn't really many Caribbean people in my part of Florida. I was in Tallahassee. So that was North Florida, basically Georgia, if you're being honest.
Yeah.
But, I still met Caribbean people there, but Caribbean people who had American accents, they grew up in the Caribbean, but they are so far removed from the Caribbean culture, and their understanding of their home is skewed. But they think that it's rooted in. I mean, I can't judge people for thinking that they aren't rooted, but I know, when if I were to speak to somebody from their country, they have a totally different experience from them because they have politicians as family members and their parents give them an allowance every month, even though they're 30s or late 20s kind of thing. Those are the kind of people that I've encountered over my time. So for me, it's more so I just think about the Caribbean and the classes that exist throughout the Caribbean and try to get a deep and unbiased understanding of each one so that when I'm telling my stories, I'm doing an accurate representation of them all.
Right.
If the question.
Yeah, so the thing about the identity is what people choose to show, right? Especially when they're not around a comfortable or what is the word I'm looking for? A recognizable environment, somewhere that they're from. That is who you really are, right? When you're not in a place of comfort, what you choose to show, who you choose to be. So yeah, seeing people in the diaspora is one thing, and what they choose to present is not always homogeneous. It's not always the same. It's not always the same. It's not always the same Trini. But we say that the phrase Trini to the bone and things like that, and we like carnival and all of that. But when you come to Trinidad, or most times when you interact with Trinis, below our face level, there's always a kind of disconnect. And I stand to question that on the show because I stand to think that the Trinis outside of Trinidad are kind of are more Trinis than the Trinis in Trinidad.
Never.
I kind of lean into it. But but it's a theory. Not necessarily more authentic or more real per se, but
think they never really ever get the full experience of what it is to be Trini. Even the bad parts, the things that we struggle with. There's a certain level of access being away from home that people have that you don't have when you are home. And, I feel like that shapes the identity even further. Like if you get to experience this place and just the fun parts of it for 2 months out of the year or 1 week out of the year, you would never really know what we are. And that's for me why I always make it my duty to spend a lot more time home whenever I visit. Like I don't ever want to be completely living somewhere else because there's going to be a time when eventually I have no idea what a certain generation of Trinidadians exist like, what they speak like, the things that they enjoy doing, the slangs that emerge from their existence. You will never be able to fully know that if you're not in the country.
Yeah, I agree. But I also think that those are transient things because they change. They change with the generations. They change with different experiences and the access. But the crux of the eye.
Oh, sorry. I would say because they change that is why it's hard for somebody who doesn't live here to be more Trini. Because it changes so much. Just like I said, the existence of the Caribbean is continuous destruction and creation over time. We're never the same. As I feel like that defines our region. Like not just me saying that, Camu Braffett mentioned that, Glissant mentioned that as a defining characteristic of our space. So if you're not keeping up with the changes, how would you ever know? You're missing gaps. So there would be things that you would never fully know or understand just from not being a part of that change or knowing about that change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I understand that 100%. But my theory is that there are constants, there are things that remain true throughout the existence of the identity. And I think not just me, I think those are the things that make up the identity. They are discernible, they are constant, and they should be visible throughout everybody from the diaspora. Like I said, is a theory, is something that I'm thinking about, is something that I'm starting to see a little bit of patterns from, and something that we could explore as the show goes on. And speaking of which, 127, we get some good time from you today. Speaking of which, I'm glad that you were here to spend the time with us. One more question: Is there something, subject matter, a kind of storytelling, a kind of approach that you're not willing to explore?
I mean, I don't know it yet because I haven't encountered it. I only really just focus on what I want to explore. I don't really think about what I don't want to explore as much because naturally it's not something that I would lean towards or think about, I would say.
Even for the challenge?
For me, film is too expensive for it to be a challenge I want to do. I wouldn't tell myself to do something that is going to cost me both my art and my finances.
But what if your finances were not were not a consideration to make? What if it was funded and somebody came to you with I wouldn't say a blank check, let me be reasonable, but with the funding for a particular project, what is something you would say, I ain't doing that, hands down? That comes to mind now.
Maybe political propaganda that doesn't benefit my stance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of that going on, and we didn't even talk about AI yet. Yeah. So I think we at a nice point. We could stick a pin in the discussion. Oh, I didn't tell you. The show is inter-outer national, right? And what you've just completed is your outer view. So at some point in the future, when it's convenient to you, when you're in Trinidad, you have an open invitation. I will still be texting you and say, hey girl, you can make it. But you have an open invitation to join us in studio or on location. We're starting to do some location things. So if you're out scouting something, if you have an idea, if you're setting up a set somewhere, we could come and, do a day in the life or something interesting with you in Trinidad. And yeah, that will be an interview. So you get inter, outer view. All right.
Got it.
It late. Late by you. Anyway, so that's your open invitation. We want to thank you for joining us, for lending us your time. I'm really, really grateful. I'm feeling accomplished. That I get something off my bucket list for the show. A lot of filmmakers are people that I want to talk to. We have a lot of questions for people who tell our stories, who look at us and investigate us in front and behind the screen. So I appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much, SHARI Petty.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, later.
Ciao.
All the best. Oh, hold on. We have something to do before you actually end the call. So, yeah. So, for all intents and purposes, at the end of the show, we'll see all you next week. Bless. Later.